the vision for what I wanted to be for my life has always been bigger than what was already in most people's conversations. So that night I realized, like, oh my God, it's Portugal. We're moving to Portugal.
What?
We just didn't know it yet. So when you say, it was a bold move, for me, it never felt like it was a bold move.
What was that experience that really forged you in the fire?
I started getting very sick, what looked just like eczema. I've had eczema since I was a kid, but it just started spreading all of my body pretty rapidly. Wow. There were moments where I was just like, my only dream is to be able to take a shower and get dressed right away. That was my dream. One day I was talking to him and he told me, you're sick because you're angry.
Khairy, it's so good to see you.
I'm so excited. I really couldn't wait.
Oh, me too. So from Portugal, you live in Portugal?
Yes, I do.
I live in Hawaii.
Yes.
And we're in Florida.
And we're in Florida.
So wow, it took us getting to Florida to meet up. Thank you so much for being here right now.
I'm so glad.
Oh, I can't wait for this conversation. Okay, let's dive in. So I mentioned Portugal a moment ago. So you made a bold move, relocating your entire family to Portugal from Canada. And I know that bold moves don't happen in a vacuum. So was there a moment, a conversation, or even an internal shift that made you say, I have to do this?
Yes. Well, I think the shift happened very, very, very young. And so I cannot really tie it to Portugal because I had no idea it would be Portugal. But it's almost like the vision for what I wanted to be for my life has always been bigger than what was already in most people's conversations. And I do remember even with my husband when we were 18, 19 years old, talking about, we had just met, but it felt like we knew each other from a very long time. And we were always talking about how we wanted to live life. And things like homeschooling, being location independent and traveling the world and seeing a lot of this world was always part of what we were going to do, even if it was not mainstream.
Beautiful.
So for actually years before moving to Portugal, we knew we would be moving outside of Canada. We just never agreed on what the location would be. He's American. I was like, I don't know that I want to live in the US. I want to go back to Europe because I was in France before, or go back somewhere else, or Asia, or, And actually right before the pandemic, we had agreed on Cape Verde, which is where his family comes from.
Okay.
His mother is from Cape Verde. And then COVID hit. That didn't happen. And then one day in December of 2022, my sister-in-law, who was in Montreal for just a few hours, I was meeting her in the lobby of her hotel, and she told me about Portugal. And that night, I could not sleep when I went back home. I spent the night on Google researching Portugal, and just realizing that the reason why it hit me when she said it, although I had never set foot in Portugal, was that was a location that hit every single one of my husband and I's criteria.
Really?
Everything.
Wow.
There was no discussion there.
Wow.
And so that night I realized, like, oh my God, it's Portugal. We're moving to Portugal. What? We just didn't know it yet. So I texted my brothers and I was like, oh my God, we're moving to Portugal. Freddie doesn't know, but we're going.
Hang on. You text your brothers that you hadn't spoken to your husband at this point.
No.
Like, you're like...
My husband didn't know for 2 weeks and I was already making plans. I was like, oh, we're going.
That's incredible. He didn't know for 2 weeks. So you text your brother, literally you had that moment at night, your sister-in-law, you talked, and then literally he didn't find out
until after
find
Christmas.
Out for 2 weeks.
Because I was in my head planning stuff. And I was like, oh my God, well, how is he going to react? Although I know we're moving, he doesn't know yet. And I just wanted to wait until that was the first week of December. And I told him right after Christmas.
Okay, how did that go?
Well, clearly it went well since we made it. But I remember we went to the zoo with our kids or whatever. And then we were at this red light waiting. And I was sitting on the passenger seat. He was driving. And at that moment, I was like, oh my God, I should tell him. Should I tell him? Should I ask him now? What is he going to say?
While he's driving.
Oh, and then I was like, let's just go for it. Like, we need to move anyway. And so I told him. And then there was this silence. And then he said, let's do it, which was so different from how he typically makes decisions.
Really?
I'm like, I'll go into the wall straight ahead. If it breaks, I'll figure another way. All right.
Okay.
My husband is more cautious. He'll evaluate everything before he jumps in. But that day, for the first time, honestly, I think on such a big decision, right away he said, "Let's do it."
That's
And so we did.
amazing.
Yes.
Okay, incredible. Wow, you were really shocked when he
I
said that
was.
quickly.
I was extremely shocked.
That's amazing.
And so this was something that, so again, like the move to Portugal itself was not, I never thought that in my life I would live in Portugal, but I know what the vision for my life is, and my husband, and we've been talking about it, and it happened that Portugal it was the piece that was fitting in that, right? So when you say, it was a bold move, for me, it never felt like it was a bold move. I started hearing that word after we made the move, and I started telling people.
Yes.
And then people were commenting, "Oh my God, you're so courageous," and sending me messages and asking me, those questions. I was like, oh,
yes.
People are actually afraid to make moves like that. But for me, again, I've started making moves like that when I was 14 years old.
Yeah,
so
talk about that, because you've lived in different places. You had different experiences growing up.
Yeah.
And like, as you say, so it started for you very, very young.
Yeah.
Just tell us a little bit about that. Like, where were you born?
Yeah.
Where did you grow up? You've had so many different experiences.
Yes. So my parents are from West Africa, from Senegal. I never really lived there. I think maybe 1 year when I was born. My mom went back home to stay with her mom for a few months. But I was born in Saudi Arabia. My brothers as well. So we were born in Saudi Arabia. And at the age of 14 is when, because back then, 80s, 90s, the government would not allow boys and girls to be in the same school.
Okay,
right?
sure. Yeah.
Especially after like teenage years and so on. So at 14, pretty much everyone was leaving back then. It's still very different now, but back then that's how it was. And so when I was 14 years old is when I left home to go live in France. That's where I did my studies. And then I went to Canada for university as well. So for me, being uprooted and going and living somewhere else it's not a bold move.
With your family.
Oh no, that was
so
just
age
me.
14. You're leaving Saudi Arabia to France. At that point.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in France were you?
In the south, Nice, the best place in France. Wow, I know everyone's all about Paris. I'm like Nice and Cannes and Antibes are like the best. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's beautiful light and beautiful ocean and beautiful. Oh, just it is absolutely stunning there. So, but age 14.
Yes.
So what was that? Do you remember that? I mean, I'm guessing you remember that experience. What was that like?
I do remember. I remember my mom was crying all the time. And I was like, why is she crying? Like, what's that? Now that my son is 14, I understand, right? Because I understand how much of a baby you still are at 14 years old.
Yes.
And although I had traveled, I mean, since we were young, my parents would send us to Ethiopia on vacation or Senegal or Morocco, whatever. So we saw other things, but it's very different when you're just not going to be raised by your parents anymore at 14.
Yes.
You're going to be raised by people they don't even know yet, because I was in boarding school. There was, internet was starting, but it wasn't like it is today.
Sure.
Communication was hard too, right? So it was letters, and it was just a very different world. So my mother especially was very, very scared. But for me, the biggest thing, and that's why I'm so grateful for this experience, not only was I put in an international school, which was a great continuation from where I was in Saudi Arabia. There was one school, one French school in Jeddah, and so it was a very international school. My experience in France was the same, but what was very different is where I went from living in a country that was following a rhythm of 5 prayer interruptions per day, where the whole, the world would stop.
Wow.
For prayer. Everything would be closed. Everybody would be focused on prayer during those times, and then resuming activities.
Sure.
To going and living in a country where it was not that at all. And for me, my life had been rhythmed by that for 14 years. And now I was in boarding school where I was the only person living my rhythm. And I remember when I called my dad that first month, and I was like, it's so weird, Papa. It's like, here people live completely differently, and yet they're happy still. Wow. Right? And so I was going through these moments of doubts, and I remember he kept telling me, doubt is good.
Okay.
It's
Wow.
good that you question, and it's good that you ask all of this, and then you're going to find your own truth, right? And so that's
incredible.
what shaped me back then. So it was
Wow.
very different from everything I knew, but it opened my horizon so much at a very, very, very young age.
And that's amazing parental feedback too,
Yes.
to have that conversation and him to share that with you. Like, it's good.
Yes.
That's not something perhaps people might think normally. Doubt might say, no, it's very important to stick to. But no, it's good to doubt. It's good to question. It's good to feel into your own experience of these things. How do you think that's played out, Khairy? I don't just mean your dad's advice, but, you know, those formative years, that separation from your family and being around a completely different environment. Like, how has that played out in your life, and what impact do you think that's still having today in how you see the world and operate?
So one of the things I'm the most grateful for that experience is realizing that I was still able to live my faith, especially at such a young age, because I feel like I could have become a very different person, especially not having anybody to be held accountable to.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I found then that my parents had instilled such a great identity of self-worth and confidence, which I didn't know I had. I was very introverted. But I had such deep faith since I was very, very young. I started having, you know, these dreams and all of these things that were very spiritual at a very young age. So I felt attached to that. So being left in a country where I knew nobody, a bunch of teenagers like let loose as well.
No regular prayer times or anything like that.
And I found that I was able to stay extremely grounded,
Wow.
which a lot of my friends found inspiring. And we were all kids, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And so even I remember the principals or the staff that was taking care of us, when they would come in my room and find me praying, and they would just, you know, shut the door very slightly. Like the bus sometimes, I was very ashamed at the beginning that I would stop for prayer, and I would be like, oh, we're supposed to go to Nice for our outing for Saturday, but I need to finish my prayer. And so I would be like, you know what, if I miss the bus, it's too bad for me, and then I'll do it next time. And I would finish and realize that they were waiting for me.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean? So things like that made me realize, oh, it's okay.
Wow.
To live your faith and to do the things that you feel are extremely valuable. And the people who love you will actually respect that a lot.
That's so
and be there for
powerful.
you. So that's something that I'm extremely grateful for from a very young age, which then means that the years after that, I just live the life that I know to be true. And it's much harder for me to be swayed by the world that happens around us. I just feel very grounded, if that makes sense.
It makes absolute
and
sense.
that experience, I believe, created that, because it planted those roots. And that is how I raise my kids right now. My son is doing a lot of traveling. He's 14 now. Yes.
Hey, wow.
In Portugal, he's in this leadership program. They do a lot of travel. And I was just having that conversation with him like 2 weeks ago before he traveled. And I was telling him, you know, even as you go and you're in different environments, you have to remember what is really important, and you have to remember what is true, and you just have to remember to continue doing those things that you know to be true.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they will just support you. So it's very important to maintain your discipline, even when you're with people who do not have the same discipline, or they don't have the same focus as you, because that is where it's hard.
Yes, that's so powerful. I'm hearing you used the word grounded a moment ago, and even your peers at that age noticed that, or your teachers coming in the room would feel that. And I'm also experiencing having this conversation with you. There was it's remarkable, Khairy, as a 14-year-old. If you think about, if I think about 14 years old and being in high school, or, okay, we didn't call it high school, but senior school, and all of, the hormones and everything that's going on, but just the confidence and the clarity and the grounding. But I'm really experiencing this quiet rhythm.
Yeah.
Almost. I know you talked about the rhythm of the prayer times in Saudi Arabia, and those weren't there in France, but this inner quiet,
Yes.
assuredness, but not shouty, not like, oh, no, like drama.
Yeah.
I need to do my praying, or I need to do my thing. Oh, no, the bus is going to get quiet. This is what's true.
Yes.
For me.
Yeah.
And to know that at such a young age is huge. I mean, really, really huge. I really, really hear that. And it reminds me too, some people listening to this podcast will have heard this story, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, but I spent almost 8 years living in a meditation center in my 20s. Yeah. And I remember when I left, going back and speaking to, it was just me and another lady that lived there. And we sat and we had a cup of tea. This is a couple of years after I left and moved on and done my own thing. And we sat down and had this cup of tea. And she said, Kate, can I ask you a question? And I said, sure, Helena. Her name was Helena. Sure. And she said, a lot of people leave living in a meditation center. And she'd spoken to different people and they feel really guilty. Like they feel like this, it means something.
Right.
Like, you didn't go through that? Why? And this conversation is reminding me of that moment too, Khairy, because like you're sharing here, I mean, when somebody asks me those kind of questions, I really feel into it and I'm like, why is that?
Right,
I considered that. I just did what I did. But it's absolutely what you're talking about here. Mm. I knew at that moment it was the right thing.
Yes.
For me. And it wasn't drama and it wasn't, and that was my answer to her it was time to leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was that clear. And I'm really hearing that resonance in what you're sharing here too. And as clear as you, so age 14, clear and that groundedness, and then traffic lights. We need to, Portugal. And luckily, Freddie, your husband, okay, good. Yeah. And you're like, wow, he's actually saying okay. And there is uncertainty. Mm-hmm. You'd never stepped foot in Portugal before, which is
now maybe that was a crazy move, not a bold move. It was a crazy move, but
you knew you were like, that's where we're going. You agreed. And how old were your children when you moved there?
My son was 12, almost 13, mm-hmm. and my daughter was 7.
Okay, yes. Great. Yes. So 12, almost 13, and 7. And so a move like that, it does come with uncertainty. I mean, the fact you haven't stepped foot in Portugal before, there's all kinds of unknown. Where are they going to be at school? If they're going to go to school, and we'll talk about that in a moment as well. What was the biggest internal fear you had to confront? Was there an internal fear at all?
No. It's weird. It's become very hard for me to be afraid. Like, there's not a lot of things that make me frightened. Mm-hmm. And in this whole process, I was just like, if it doesn't work out, we'll just come back. Or we'll choose a different country. Like, nothing really is the end of the world. I think a lot of people get scared by stories of their own making. Yes. And when you really look at the facts, none of them are true. So I just like my energy and keeping it. And I would rather not just, dilute it by being afraid of a lot of things.
Yeah.
So no, and I think that's something I got from my dad. My mom is a very anxious person.
Is she?
My dad is very calm. And he's always been very calm and very optimistic, and things always end up working out, and I think that's where his answer about, it's okay to doubt. Yeah, it's going to be fine. You'll find and he's very, very spiritual as well. And so that side, my brothers and I definitely got from him. We actually talk about that a lot. We're like, why aren't we ever fazed by stuff? Everyone is freaking out. Should we be phased? Yeah. So this is a phasing kind of situation. And I remember my first brother, who's right after me, he was saying, yeah, but we got it from dad. And my dad is very chill. So it's very... it's not in my nature to freak out about things. So that's the first thing. And what I've learned over time is that everything always autocorrects. This universe was functioning before we got here, and it's going to continue to function even after we're out. And it is self-sustaining, and it likes itself. So at the end of the day, us being part of it, I do believe that if we get out of the way, things will always autocorrect for expansion and progress and success. It's our doubts and our questioning and our fears that interfere, and it creates a lot of noise in the process, right?
Yes.
Which makes us, and that is where we derive the anxiety. And so for me, I'm just like, no, I just don't really subscribe to that. So I would rather just focus on the excitement of the move and everything that's going to be new.
Yeah.
And worst case, it'll autocorrect and self-correct, and we'll find a new destination, or we'll come back and it's fine.
I love you phrased it a few moments ago. The stories we tell ourselves that scare us.
Yes, 100%.
We do. We tell ourselves, literally, it's like reading, I don't know, ghost stories to a kid at bedtime. And I want to relate that to business, Khairy, because you guide high-level executives, entrepreneurs in their leadership.
Yes.
And as you were speaking about the stories that scare us, I was literally remembering conversations, and also myself in my own life and business journey. And I was having a conversation earlier today for this podcast with somebody sitting right here. And we were talking about analysis paralysis, for example, and how we tell ourselves stories that can scare us. And so often those stories stop us taking the action. And I want to tie that into also this philosophy, I don't know if philosophy is the right word, but this way of looking at things, that things do autocorrect, they do self-correct. And so, like you said about Portugal, if it's not the right country,
the words that could,
we can shift it, we can change it.
Yes.
Can you speak to, and really speak to people listening, the person listening right now that's like, to use the earlier words, analysis paralysis, maybe to use your words, they're telling stories that would scare themselves, or it's just like, this is the decision, it's all on this. Like, speak to that. And how do we move beyond those stories that scare us and actually take the action?
Yes. So, you know why this is a hard question, I find, is that I think everybody understands it in theory.
Yeah.
But most people only get to really understand it when they get through a very traumatic experience that then shows them how important it is to overcome those stories. So unfortunately, you'll hear a lot of people saying, oh my God, I realized that, blah, blah, blah. But it was after they burned and rose up from the ashes again. Which is what happened to me. But what I wish people would do, and this is how I coach my clients as well, is for them to just learn to use the muscle of making a decision quickly. One thing that I've learned over 15 years of consulting, with business owners or business leaders, is that the people who succeed, and who succeed well over a long period of time, they fail a lot. They fail so much more than the beginner entrepreneurs that I've met, who never really get to, accomplish their full potential because they don't try enough. So when I look at the clients that I work with, most of them are running multi-million-dollar businesses. They make decisions extremely quickly. They bounce back off of failure extremely rapidly, and they just make the next best decision. A lot of times they don't have all the details. They don't have the answers. They've never done the thing. They have no idea if it's going to work or not, but they just decide and move.
What the next
best thing, considering,
all the way down the line, if I do this, then like a domino, and what happens? No, the next,
just the next best thing that For me, it was the same thing moving to Portugal. I was just taking it one step at a time. We need this paper. Let's figure out where to get this paper. Okay, we need this other thing. Now we need to figure out how to get the cat that we had no idea we would have a cat to Portugal as well. The next best thing, right? We landed there. We didn't know where we were going to live. Let's just choose somewhere.
Hang on, you landed there and you hadn't done X, Y, Z, as we'd say in the States here. You landed and you didn't know where.
We didn't know where we were going to live long term. I never set foot in Portugal. I didn't know what I liked or did not like in Portugal.
That sounds amazing. That is so amazing.
So we were just the next best decision.
Okay. Yeah.
And that if you start doing that, you will start flexing your muscle. You'll start discerning what felt right or felt wrong as you were making the decision, right? And you start becoming extremely intuitive because you've ran the reps of making those decisions and seeing the feedback.
Yes.
So for me now, because I adopted that very, over the years, I've done a lot of decisions. A lot of them sucked and a lot of them were really good. But getting in the habit of making decisions fast, then seeing it through and seeing what the feedback is, you actually get to move through life and live a lot of your dreams faster. You get to hear the feedback and then trust your decision making faster. So the only way to trust your decisions is to make a lot of them. So that you learn what it feels like versus what it doesn't. The reason Portugal, I knew right away this is where we're moving, is from being in the habit of making those decisions. So as soon as it hit, I was like, oh, we are moving. Oh my God.
That one feels true. That one feels right. That's the next best
decision.
Thing. Wow.
And in a lot of things, it happens. And even when coaching clients, that is what I want them to get in the habit of doing, right? And my most advanced clients, which is like 95% of my clients are above, 2 to 5 million. They make decisions quickly, and then we look at the feedback. The ones who struggle most take a long time to make a decision.
Wow.
And by the time they made the decision, the hit has passed. Like the universe has moved on.
It's gone.
And it's so much harder to get things moving, right? So get in the habit of making decisions quickly and trust that the universe knows better than you, is stronger than you, is faster than you. And it's going to make it happen. If you just stay out of the way, just make the decisions and keep the momentum going.
Yes.
Once you kill the momentum, it's just harder to reload it.
That's really true in anything. I'm definitely not a physician as physics, but that is true. It's harder to move something from a standstill than something that's already in motion. I think there is a law about that.
Exactly.
I can't recall in this moment. I know people listening are like, it's the law of. Brilliant. If you know what that law is, well done. Gold star.
But that is really, momentum is incredible.
Yeah.
So if you can keep the momentum going, whatever you're doing, by continuing to make the next best decision, considering everything you have, and trust that force is much bigger than you, are in your corner, and that they're going to make you, they're going to make the corrections for you.
And then something else I heard you say about the leaders that you work with is make the next best decision.
Yes.
Get the feedback.
Yes.
And then connecting that with what you were speaking about earlier, I'm guessing, don't tell loads of stories about the feedback in your own head. Like, feedback.
Yes.
And then make the next best decision.
Exactly.
From that. Okay.
And typically that's how they take it, as feedback. Yeah. They don't dwell on the meaning of the thing. No. And even when they do, it's typically easier to get them out of it, is what I have just noticed. But that is also because they're focused on a much bigger. Okay, this is the other piece that I think is super important for people to remember. When people become really good at doing that, it's also because they're driven by something that's bigger than just having money in their bank account and their immediate needs, right? When you have a mission that's much bigger than you, it is actually easier to focus on, to take those failures less personally, and to focus on just continuing to build the momentum for this other big thing. When I find that people are so afraid to make decisions and they're, analysis paralysis, they're too focused on themselves.
Yes.
It's still very ego driven. And I can say this because that was me. Guilty. That was me for a long time. And then I realized, and I was like, and I kept praying for a long time to find what that purpose needed to be, right? But once you have that, it is actually so easy to look at the things that don't work and be like, okay, well, next, let's make the next decision.
That's super powerful. I am going to ask you in this moment then, that purpose. So you said you prayed about that for a long time. Like, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? And it's such beautiful self-awareness of knowing that those times where you got stuck, it was like, it's about me. It's about me. And I mean, both hands up here too. I absolutely know that's true for myself as well, Khairy. So what is the purpose behind what you do? I did not know I was going to ask you that question. But I'm going to ask you that question right now.
So the way that it expresses itself has shifted over the years. And even now, I see a much bigger one that I'm surprised by. I'm actually excited. But for what I realized several years ago is what was attracting people to me, which I didn't know, right? People typically come and ask questions and they want always things related to the future, but it was inspiration. So being inspired to actually do the things. And even when I look at how I do my business strategy with clients and so on, I love to spend time on their business model and helping them envision their future. And the way I see their future tends to be bigger than how they see their future.
Yes.
So many times I have told clients in the past 5 years, hey, you know, I had one just yesterday, I was doing a hot seat at an event, and she said, Khairy gave me this big goal again. I remember back in 2020, she was one of my first clients, and 4 months after we started working together, I told her, you know, you're going to make $1 million this year. She had only made 200K max in a year.
Okay,
before.
so quite a jump.
Yes. Yeah. And I told her, you know, you're going to make $1 million in April. And she was like, what? I was like, you don't see it? Oh my God, it's like banner flashlights for me.
It was triggered to you. You could see it. Totally see it.
Lo and behold, by the end of that year, she had, you know, reached $1 million, and she's been in there since then, right? In the multi-million. And for many people like that, I just am able to see what their future can be, their potential.
Yes.
And that's what I've always been super, super fascinated by, is just helping people capture that vision with me and helping them see how they can get there and just getting people there. Now, the vehicle that I chose is business strategy. I could have done it through fitness, or I could have done it through, you know, food or whatever that is. I just chose business strategy. So for people who are wondering, you know, oh, how do I take what I feel I'm really good at, what people come to me for? I would say just look at that and look at how do you want to express it, because there's so many different ways for you to do that. And now when I look at what that same concept of almost like future casting and vision casting and creating sustainability in that process, I look at the world that we're getting into, the world that the AI era that we're in. And what became very clear for me is that, oh, I need to help people see themselves in this new era and future-proof their business in this new era. So it is beyond just a business strategy. It is now I understand some of the decisions that I made when I was in my 20s and studying information systems and being so tech-driven as well, because at that intersection of tech and business strategy is what the world that we're moving into very, very fast.
Yes.
So it's the same mission, but the vehicle is looking a little bit different. And so that is the purpose. The purpose is creating sustainability and creating a clear vision for people so that they can really tap into how they can contribute to this world that they're in.
That's beautiful. I love that phrase you used as well, like future proofing.
Yes.
Future proofing. So there is so much. I mean, back to this theme of we were talking about in the beginning of uncertainty and the rapidity of which things are changing, the velocity of which things are shifting and changing. It's almost, I mean, we're really, I always feel like tectonic plates, you know, right? These are the whole foundations of everything is moving. And sitting here, and I know conversations we've had too, Khairy, not just here in this conversation, but knowing you, we've known each other, what, five
years now,
I think. And even, I think one of our first conversations was about Google Drive and organizing systems and stuff. So,
but hey, you guys have somewhere
that systematization. But yeah, I've always loved your, I'm going to use the word relish, actually, the relish of, like this system or this thing. And yes, with this evolution, which even the word evolution feels too slow, quite frankly, for what AI is now doing. And I feel that whenever we've had conversations from you, like, oh, this is juicy. Like
it is juicy.
Fascination. And then bringing it back to the individual, and whether it's a solopreneur or a business owner with a team, but really having that conversation around future proofing.
Future-proofing.
What is that vision they have? And then how can we actually work with what's happening?
Yes.
Interestingly enough, rather than back to the stories that we might tell ourselves in our head around it,
Yes.
you're talking about, or going into that fear.
Yes.
They're saying, here it is. This is the next best move,
Yes.
and to embrace that.
Absolutely.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, you work with high-level executives and leaders. What's the biggest unspoken challenge that you see among today's leaders? The thing that, I mean, I guess no one wants to admit that they struggle with, and you've seen behind the scenes of some very outwardly successful entrepreneurs and business owners. So something no one wants to admit they struggle with, but you see it again and again. What would that be?
Yes. And I think it's exactly what you just said. I feel so honored that I get to be in those one-on-one private conversations with those people who are leading their industries and who are, recognized and so on. And at the end of the day, what is really important to realize is that everybody is human, and people go through the same struggles, no matter how famous they are, no matter how much of a brand they have, no matter how successful they are. Everybody goes through the same things.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I believe that our biggest challenge as humans is that evolution of who we're meant to be. Like we always are going to hit the next ceiling. We're always going to have to overcome our stories, and we have those stories no matter what. I have seen people making zero, having imposter syndrome, and I have seen people making tens of millions of dollars or even more and having imposter syndrome.
Wow.
So it's the same things. I always say, like, when people are hitting problems in their business, again, no matter what the size, it's personal problems that are showing up as symptoms in the business.
That's
right?
true, isn't it?
So, and every business has problems. So it means the humans within the business, because a business is not a physical thing. Even if there's a building, it is an accumulation of energy from different human beings. So when people's energy is not right, the business will suffer. And every business owner, no matter how successful, will have moments where the business is not going right. And typically, yes, there is some strategy, but mostly it is stories we need to overcome. It is attitude we need to talk about. It is priorities we need to revisit, right? So the human is always human at the end of the day. And we just need to realize that it doesn't go away. Right?
Wow.
It doesn't go away no matter how much you accomplish.
Yeah.
That growth will continue to need to happen until the moment you're gone from this world. And that's what people don't talk about. I think social media glorifies the image of success so much that people don't realize how much is still required at that level. And actually, even more is required at that level. Because when you look at people running multi-million-dollar businesses, they actually have to hold so much more energy than somebody who's a solopreneur and runs their business alone at home, maybe with a VA.
Yes.
It requires a lot of capacity and a lot of being grounded and just being strong, to be honest, to hold your team's energy, your client's energy, your vendor's energy, your partner's energy, the media's energy. That is a lot to sustain for a human.
Yeah.
And when people get to that point, it means that they went through a lot before in order to get to be able to sustain all of that.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Yeah. And literally for the universe, I believe, to trust that this human can handle all of that, they must have been tested many, many times before.
Yes.
So that is what people, I think, don't realize. They just look at the glory of it and like, oh, I want to do what she's doing. So she's always nicely dressed.
Oh,
she's making all
whatever. That's so
but they don't realize what that person has to go through in order to get there.
Yes.
And especially in order to sustain it.
That reminds me of, I don't know where I saw it, a meme on social somewhere, but it was written about, we just see the finished film, the movie. The finished thing, and what we don't see behind the scenes is the cutting room floor of all of those outtakes. And I know, like, B-roll has become more and more popular in showing behind the scenes, but we don't see that cutting room floor. But in the days before digital film and media, literally rolls of negatives, things that are never ever going to be used, the frustration, the tears, That's not what we're consuming on a daily basis on social media. We're literally consuming the finished product, the piece that's been chosen, curated for public consumption.
Absolutely. And then people think that that's the reality. But that's also why I'm fascinated with athletes. I have a martial arts background. I love it. But I know how hard, and for me, that's how I see business owners, right? Especially the ones who choose to do this for a long period of time. I see them as athletes because when you are an athlete, I remember some of my martial arts exams, especially because I was one of the very few. I remember in 2015 when I did a very specific martial arts exam, I was the only woman. Said by Grandmaster had created that school decades ago to reach that level. Right. And many times I almost gave up. I was crying all the time. Starting 2015, all of my exams, I would cry all the time because it was so hard. And I would see everyone else like preparing for those exams, just what it takes to show up every day. And it's so hard and it's painful. You bleed many times, scarring and so on. But then you still show up for that little sliver of a moment that people will see. People don't see everything that happened when you were alone in the training room at 6, 7 a.m. in the morning, training, exhausted, going to bed at night, right? And for a lot of athletes who were talking about a fight that happened yesterday, it's like people don't see, they only see the fight, the arena. They don't see what happened in the gym, what happened, beforehand. And for a lot of business owners, we see their reels on social media, but we don't see what it took to be able to be in a position to record that reel, right?
True.
So yes, there is still a lot of people who record reels that are not really reflective of where they truly at. But I have the opportunity to work with a lot of people who are real business owners and who are doing the thing, and it's not easy. Just like anything that is worthwhile may not be easy. It does require effort, to sustain all of that, but it is so fulfilling when you do it. It's fun. Like it's good. It's
It feels true. And it feels like the right next step, as you were speaking about earlier. So Khairy, something else you said earlier, and you've alluded to it a few times in this conversation, is that many of the entrepreneurs you've worked with, and you alluded to it for yourself as well, have been through stuff. And actually the words you used earlier were, burnt it down, or things have burnt down in the past. So for you, what was that? What was that experience that really forged you in the fire, as it were?
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Tell us about that.
I can talk about it now and smile and laugh and be like, oh my God, that was your best stage that reel now. Yeah. But it was actually, so I was very sick. I got very sick in 2013. Let me see, end of 2013, beginning of 2014. I started getting very sick, what looked just like eczema. I've had eczema since I was a kid, but it just started spreading all of my body pretty rapidly. And that same year, so my symptoms started in January. In September, my husband was actually, so we lived in Canada, and he was on tour here in the US, and he was in Pennsylvania. I can't remember exactly where, and he collapsed on stage during sound check, right? And so just imagine I get this call.
Oh my gosh,
your
you were in
husband
Canada.
I was in Canada with our 3-year-old, and getting that call, and that stress, I think, and realizing, I remember when the neurosurgeon called me and told me he had an abscess in his brain and they needed to operate. And he was, I can't even remember the whole conversation, but he was just giving me all of those details. And that stress, and then he ended up having 3, brain surgeries. First one in the US, then they flew us to Canada by air ambulance. He got 2 others over there. And with that whole process, it's like my own disease just also exploded, right?
Oh my God.
And so for 3 years, I battled that. So long after he was okay and he was, on the recovery, I was going still spiraling downward. And on the outside, most people never realize that was happening. But on the inside, it really felt like dying.
Wow. What was it like?
It is so hard to put it into word. It was painful. It was, imagine that your whole body is infected. You don't really know what's causing it, so you can't really stop it. I tried everything. I tried so many doctors, specialties, natural stuff. Nothing would work. I traveled for it. Nothing would work. I didn't sleep for 3.5 years. I would maybe sleep an hour here and there when I was too exhausted to even function. But I spent my nights trying to find a cure. My days, I was the main breadwinner. My husband could not work for a while because he was recovering, and he had broken his shoulder in the process. So he was recovering for a while.
Going through. Is he better now?
He's much better now. Okay. He's great now. But back then it was, it was really bad. But I couldn't stop working. Right, as the main breadwinner. So I remember there were days I couldn't walk because my skin was in shambles, and I would have to sometimes lie that, I hurt myself doing this, or I stumbled in the stairs, just because I was ashamed of everything. Right, like everything was hard. Taking a shower was hard. Eating was hard because I would react to everything. Doing like basic stuff. There were moments where I was just like, my only dream is to be able to take a shower and get dressed right away. That was my dream back in 2015, 2016, 2017.
Not that long ago.
No.
Oh my God.
That is all I could dream of to this day when I take a shower and I get up and I get dressed, or it feels so good. Back then, sometimes it would take me 2 hours, 2.5 hours to be able to put some clothes on because of the pain. Right? So imagine when you're a consultant and you have to show up at your best and you're in boardrooms, but you have to wake up at 3, 4 sometimes in the morning just to be sure you can get dressed on time. And
that's you were doing that.
That's what I was doing.
And nobody could find out what was wrong. Not get a diagnosis. There wasn't anything that seemed to be making a difference in terms of treatment.
Nothing worked. And when things are like that, you start entertaining really weird thoughts.
Sure. I mean, talk about stories that we tell ourselves that scare us. I'm sure a few of those came up during that time.
Yes.
And not just you, but I'm guessing your husband probably was also having...
It was very hard, for him too.
It was scaring him. So what happened? And I mean, you're sitting here in front of you. Did you get up at 3 a.m. to...
Oh my God, no. I got up. No, now it's just I'm still I can't believe that I'm still here. There was a point that one of the people who helped me heal, like there was a point where I was given like 3 weeks, and they were because it said everything was infected. Like literally when I would get cut or something, there was no blood. It was all like white liquids. It was like. The whole thing it was really weird. But what happened, which is why I'm so grateful for my martial arts grandmaster. He is a Chinese doctor as well. One day I was talking to him and he told me, you're sick because you're angry. That is why you're sick. And
did he just say that out of the blue? Like
100%.
Wow.
He just said that out of the blue completely, like very directly. He said, you're sick because you're angry. And I said, what do you mean, Grandmaster? I'm like the happiest person on earth. Like I'm always laughing. I'm always in a good mood. But when somebody says something that is true, even if you don't agree, it keeps playing in your mind.
There's some tingles of truth that kind of ripple down a little bit. Like,
and it started hitting me like in waves and just piercing deeper every single time I thought of it. And I was like, I wonder what I am angry about. And that opened a whole Pandora box. So Grandmaster, if you're listening to this, thank you. That was very hard. But I started realizing that there was a lot of stuff that I was actually very resentful, about like my husband, my mother, like just the world in general, myself.
Wow.
There was a lot of stuff that I had pent up and I just never realized that it was resentment. I was just taking on, when you're the eldest and when you left home early, I tend to take on a lot on myself.
Yes.
But that was clearly not working.
Clearly not working. And thank you, Grandmaster, for pointing this out. And you had never looked at any of this stuff before. You just got on with your life and carried on. And then your body was like, hang on a minute.
Yeah. Exactly.
Something's not working here.
Yeah.
Something's not up. So what happened next?
Yes. I just realized that a lot of the conditioning that I had received And especially as a woman, especially where I come from, like there's even this word that we use, mun. Mun is in Wolof is like, it's almost like to sacrifice yourself for, it is actually considered a virtue where I come from. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I had done a lot of that, but it was literally killing me on the inside.
Oh my God.
And so what I did is I just started uncovering all of those things. So that's when I decided to go deeper into personal development, because I had always done that back in college. I was reading Stephen Covey's 7, I was doing all of that. But this is when I started working really on uncovering and going back to questioning everything that I thought was true.
Wow.
Everything. Like there was a 2-week period, I remember, in July 2015, where I was walking in my house and I got to the door that was between the kitchen and the living room. And I stopped there and I was like, oh my God, I don't even know what I believe anymore.
Wow.
Because I was questioning everything that I thought to be true. And that just started uncovering these really hard conversations with myself, with my husband. Those were really hard for 2 years, with my mother, with just everything.
Two things come to mind. One was your father's word.
Yes.
When you were 14 and moved to France, of it's good to doubt.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing and feeling, whereas that 14-year-old was sure, had that assuredness. This feels different.
This was completely different. This shattered everything.
This feels like that was not a calm grounding. It's like, wow, like everything's falling away. I had a wonderful lady on this podcast, and she once described, she said, when you think you're on the bottom floor, like the ground floor. And then I love how she put this. She said, and then you realize you're standing on a trapdoor.
Yes.
And the bolt's not closed.
That's pretty much how it felt, except I didn't know how deep the fall was, and the fall took 2.5 years.
Oh my God. And then you're looking up going, well, the ground floor is pretty good right now. Oh my gosh. So you talked about conversations with your family, with your husband. Now, we know you were sitting at traffic lights earlier on in this conversation, although that was later on in your life. And Portugal. And your husband's like, yes. Now, how did your husband, how did you approach those? Did you go to a therapist?
No.
Were you in a counselor's office?
No, we never did any of that. It was just talking. And I have to say, we started becoming better at communicating in the process.
Okay.
We thought we were communicating well before, but we were not. We met when we were 18 years old. We were kids, and I grew up through adulthood together at that point, right? And we realized that a lot of the communicating we were doing before was just to accept everything and not say to each other our real truth. We had a lot of love for each other. We still do.
Sure.
But back then we were just trying not to rock the boat. Wanted to have that synergy all the time. You know what I mean?
I do.
And then when this happened, it was like I realized that if I wanted to survive this disease, I just had to remove all the filters. That's what it looked like. And so when you go from having all of these filters to appear nice and supportive and all the things, and you remove them and you remove all filters, because it was like either that or I'm going to die, like literally. It was very hard conversations, and it was very unplanned conversations. They would come out like, I would sit, I would meditate, I would journal, and then something would come up.
Wow. And
then at some point in those 24 hours, I would address it. And he would do the same thing, and it would clash. And that's how I realized, oh my God, like we didn't have the same vision on little things. But we were not seeing little things the same way at all. Wow. Right? Which was causing misunderstandings, and it was causing that feeling of sacrifice gosh. And there was just a lot of resentment, on both fronts, both ends, accumulated because of that.
Wow. How on earth did you get through that? I mean, for anybody listening right now that's like, oh my gosh, this is sounding really close to home in terms of we're not seeing, whether it's a partner, a husband, a wife, business partner, team member, anybody that's a really significant relationship in your life. And they're sitting there going, how do you get past that impasse, that place where we are in such different places? What would you say to that?
What I would say is, again, just take the next best step. And for us, it was just have the next conversation. I had no idea where this would lead us. He had no idea where this would lead us. But I think when you get to that point where you almost have no choice, is you just are not afraid to talk anymore. And so that moment definitely removed for me any fear of having any conversation. Because if you can have such hard conversation with the person that you love the most, and it is painful conversations, like there was a lot of tears, there was a lot of, it was heavy all the time, right?
Yeah.
But it was just not being afraid to have the next conversation. And it was okay if we already talked about it 5 times and we thought we were done, and we actually were not. And it's then open it again and just let the abscess just flow and just clean it up. You know what I mean? So that is what we did. We were just okay with just letting it all out.
Wow.
Even if it was painful and even if it took years. I think just a lot of people are afraid of having the hard conversations because they're afraid it's going to hurt. But it's going to hurt either way, either because you have the conversation or you don't, and then it has other consequences. So what I would say is, like, if there is a hard conversation you're supposed to have right now and you know it, go and have it. Because otherwise you're robbing yourself of a really beautiful future. I don't think my husband and I would be happy the way we are now if we hadn't gone through that. And what I see too in businesses and on teams is that when people are afraid to talk and when people are not saying all of their truth on a regular basis, it will impact the business and it will impact the relationships, right? So with my clients, I am not afraid to tell them when they're messing up, and I will typically ask, "Hey, permission to speak freely. You're doing this right now, and now you're trying to blame X, Y, and Z and me, and I'm not having that."
And me,
and yeah, you're in the mix, and it's because you're afraid to be successful right now. You just hit a really new high, and you're freaking scared, and now you're trying to burn it all down, and we're not going to do that.
Oh my gosh!
And then they realize, oh my God, yes, I almost did that. And I do believe that has saved many businesses.
That's amazing. Do you have a story you could? I mean, I'm feeling it right now. Do you have a story you could share about that?
Yes, there was
a life example.
There's actually one of my first client working with Kelly Roach when I started coaching her clients. My first client, she was amazing. When she came in, she was making a little bit of money, but her business hadn't reached the potential of what it could be. And every time I looked, I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to do amazing things. 3 months in, she had a first launch, and it brought in a matter of 2 weeks, half of what she had made the previous year.
Wow.
And she was so happy. And I still have the audio message that she shared with me. And she was like, "Khairy, I'm so happy. This is going to change my life and my family's life. I can't believe this is the most amount of money I've ever brought in," etc., etc. And then 6 weeks later, she started just doing things and trying to remove herself from the coaching and blaming, you know what I mean? She just started being a completely different person. And so I entertained it for a little bit because I was trying to be nice. But then one day I got her on a call and I was like, "Permission to speak freely?" And she said, "Yes, okay." And that's exactly what I told her. I told her, "You just made a really good amount of money and it feels very uncomfortable right now. And so you're by default trying to go back to what you know. And in order to make that logical in your mind, you're blaming the program and you're blaming that thing and you're blaming that thing and you're blaming that thing. But at the end of the day, you're just literally trying to burn it down because it feels uncomfortable." And she paused.
I was going to say, how did she take it?
She paused and then she said, okay, I can receive that. I can see that. And in that moment, she opened up to at least staying in our consulting and continuing versus removing herself completely.
Oh, was this in a case of she was also blaming?
Oh,
she wasn't working.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
When she had just made more money than she had ever made.
Oh, wow.
I was like,
Literally.
how does this make sense in your mind?
Okay. Amazing.
Right? And so she stayed. Now, it took a few months to really get her back. By the end of that year, she had made more than double what she made the year before, right?
Mm-hmm.
A year later, she tripled that.
Wow.
And now she is running a very successful business.
That's amazing.
With a team. And in the process of all of that, though, what she learned and what I was literally just interviewing her 2 weeks ago, and I told her, you know what I am most proud of for you is the person you've become as you've now gone from barely making any money to making so much in your business where people are like throwing their money at you. It's the person you've become.
Yeah.
You went from me, it took me every time like 3 to 4 months to get you back on the saddle to now it's a quick audio message, 30 seconds that I send you and you're like, okay, let's go.
That's amazing.
Right? It's like that ability to bounce back very, very quickly, make the next decision quickly. And God knows she had a lot of trauma with team and all of that in these past 5 years that she and I worked through.
Sure.
But it's who she became in the process, who she allowed herself to be. I knew she could do it. It's always easier to say for the other people.
Oh, from the outside, it's so true.
Right?
So true.
But that is what it took. And we tend to do that. We tend to be afraid to have those hard conversations. I find that being very sick and going through that with the person who was closest to me, that I had to wake up with and go to bed with every single day and raise a child with every single day, just remove that fear. And I see that because of that now I'm grateful. I can have hard conversation with anybody. Like nothing scares me when it comes to that.
So
and I see people around me that I love who are afraid of having conversations. And so they're not able to build the strong relationships around them because of it. Right?
Yeah.
And I just find that having hard conversations builds trust. You trust people more, people trust you more. There is nothing that is unsaid. And because of that, you get to reap so much more, so many more benefits. Yes. So don't be afraid to have the hard conversations is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. You heard it here. And I'm also hearing threads of what we've spoken about throughout this conversation, Khairy, in that case study, in that example, if you like, which was there must have been some stories in her head to come to that original call. And such an extreme, obvious case if you just made the most money you've ever made. And now, 2 weeks later, we're having the conversation of, I don't think this is working.
And I'm sure in her head it made sense.
Yes.
It just didn't for me.
And there's a whole narrative has happened in there. There's threads of stories. And it's the team or it's this or it's the program or it's this. And so to actually have you to have been through what you've been through, to see it, to smell it. I used to know somebody, as a kind of funny term, but they used to say you can't put icing on a shit pie.
Yes.
Actually, it will still smell. But you were willing to call it out for what it was in that moment. And so testament to all of those times and conversations with your incredible husband, both of you. I hear that for both of you, really, really bringing that to those conversations. And it's exciting for the clients you work with. And
it is now the best. I can say now it's the best thing that ever happened, because even now, sometimes we have hard conversation. We had one last year and we just went on a walk and we just said all the things and we talked for 2.5, 3 hours. And then it was resolved because now we know the foundation of what we have.
Yes.
Because we've done it before. Yeah. So now we know that even when we have a really tough conversation, it's fine. We just need to let it out and, see each other's perspective, come to an agreement and understand.
Yes.
And then we move on. And it has created the most, blessed marriage I could have ever experienced. Like it's amazing now.
That's huge. And there's such a deep level of trust.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I'm really hearing. Trust, yes, in each other, but also in self.
Yes.
And really tying those threads together right from those early experiences you had in your life of, I'm not even going to use the word resilience, but really knowing yourself and knowing what works for you and the rhythm and really listening to that one next thing to do and taking that step and not adding all the stories in
100%.
around it. So what is, I mean, as we're coming towards the end, I mean, I feel like I could literally sit and talk to you for hours, Khairy. I feel like we could do episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. Maybe we'll need to do that.
Maybe we'll need to do that.
Come back, 6 months' time or however long. But the world is shifting fast. We talked about that earlier. So what do today's 2 questions here? First question is, what is really exciting about that for you? And what do today's leaders need to embody if they want to remain relevant and impactful over the next decade? We talked about future proofing.
Yes.
So what are some of the elements of that? And also I do want to tap into the excitement because I love that.
Yes.
That I can feel it.
I am very excited about that. And it's funny, the same year I started getting very sick is also, I'm realizing now, like literally as I'm saying this, is also the same year I met this man who, like this short conversation we had, like is engraved in my mind. And it was an entrepreneurial conference in Montreal. And he was the head of a science incubator where he was leading researchers and in predicting where technology was going to take us in the future. Wow. And their mission was to help humanity prepare for it. And what he was telling me is that we are not as humans ready for how fast technology is going to be shifting in the future. And he was literally describing for me in 2038 what we would be using as devices. And he's telling me, yes, in 2028, like everything would be so interconnected that you could literally lay in your bed and with like literally changing what you're wearing with a touch of a screen or a touch of a button or like he was telling me things that made no sense in 2014.
Oh my gosh. So he was talking about 2028 or 38?
2038.
2038.
So
okay, great.
So what, 13 years from now?
Not long.
Which is not
No,
long.
that's not long away.
But back in 2014, I was like, what is he saying?
Science fiction.
100%, right? But it stayed with me. It stayed with me. And I would tell that story to everybody that would listen. But when AI started becoming mainstream and everyone now is using it. So for me, as soon as I started hearing about it, of course, started playing with it and so on. And I was like, oh my God. And even seeing how by playing with AI, you realize how every 2-3 months things started shifting so quickly. And now it's even faster.
Yeah, it's day by day.
You can't even keep up with it. And I'm just realizing how much it's moving faster than we as humans can adapt, which brings a lot of possibilities. I think that there is a lot that we are going to be able to do faster to impact people in a positive way. What used to take decades to do in order to create good in the world is going to take months, maybe weeks, maybe. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So there is the potential to create so much good stuff if the people who want to do good in the world are equipped to do so. And if they stay relevant and if they educate themselves, okay? Because somebody will do things with AI.
Absolutely.
It better be the person who wants to do
good in the world. Yeah.
So that just creates so much possibility. And I do feel that it's going to allow humans to stay in their zone of genius versus wasting time on things that they're not really good at or,
Totally.
So that is one thing that I'm really very excited about what it can do for us and for the next generation. Now, the future proofing aspect of that is that I believe people need to be educated. Like we never learned about this in school.
Of course, yeah. A lot of it wasn't even around.
It wasn't even around, right? And it's still not really available and it's moving so fast anyway that even the people who are creating are learning every day. So the future proofing that I'm focused on in terms of my mission right now is to learn as much as I can every day about this and to help especially business owners because they represent the economy of every single country in this world.
Absolutely.
Is to help them future-proof their business, to help them understand what they can do, how they can leverage then their zone of genius, and use AI as a collaborator versus trying to compete with it. Because if you're not future-proofing, you're trying to compete with other people who are using it.
Sure.
And that's not going to bode well, right? So
Sure.
it's that mission which I'm really so excited about.
Oh my gosh.
And yes, and it just feels really fun and like the next right thing.
Beautiful. And I'm really hearing the work you're doing and what you're up to in the world, supporting business owners, supporting leaders. It really is that. I'm not hearing you say, everybody has to go. And I mean, I know you and I have talked offline and off camera. We love learning. Like it's our thing. I know a lot of people listening right now, they also love learning. I sometimes call it like chomping up. It's like the experience of learning is fun for you.
It is extremely.
I know a lot of other people listening as well. But what I'm not hearing you say is, oh my gosh, you know, it's imperative. Every single business owner goes and immerses themselves in learning this. But I hear you're on this really real rapidity kind of growth and enjoyment and relish of learning.
Yes.
And then something I know about you, Khairy, from knowing you for the 5 years we've known each other, is how brilliantly you are able to learn at such velocity, but then also distill that learning into simplicity and applicability. And so, and then again, there's that word relish that I feel, and that energy from you, and having worked with you as well. You know, I've been a client of yours and been on the receiving end of it. Thankfully, not too much on that. Permission to.
No, we didn't have to do a lot of that.
We might have had one conversation like that, but not too much of it, which is beautiful. But you are able to, from that velocity of learning, that love of learning, disseminate and really create simply. Here's the one next step
for you.
Like here as an individual, this is what's supported. So thank you from my heart to your heart for doing this huge amount of learning that you're up to, so that you are educating yourself at being at as much in the cutting edge as you can, so that you can in turn support business owners that are up to doing real good in the world.
Yes, that is my passion. And that happens to be my genius. Every single human has a genius, right? And if you're able to tap into that and remove all of the noise and utilize AI where it makes sense, utilize automation where it makes sense. I think a lot of people are trying to do it right now, not in the right order. And unfortunately, their businesses are suffering. So you have to be very careful with it. So that's number one. But if you're able to utilize the tools that are being created right now, even if they're not perfect, they will be in the very, very near future, and utilize them so that you can go back to your zone of genius, you're going to be able to do so much without a lot of overhead.
Yeah.
I believe a lot of new businesses will be created because of that. Just people realizing that they don't need such a big infrastructure to do the things that they want to do and impact their communities.
Yes.
Right. And some people will do it in their neighborhood. Some people will do it in their cities. Some people are doing in their country. And some people will do it globally. Right. And we need all of those different levels. But if you understand how to leverage what technology is bringing to us the right way, and you work on your stories, and you are good with taking just that next step every single time, and get the support that you need. I know I always work with a coach. I always work with multiple coaches for that reason, to make sure that I'm staying where I need to be, in my lane in that way, and impact the way that I want to impact. Then we're going to see a much better world. I really believe that.
That's so beautiful, Khairy. Okay, 2 final questions. First question, how do people find you?
Yes, I would say Khairy Varre on all socials, but my big passion project is my podcast as well. So the Mastery Matrix
what a great name. Oh my gosh, the Mastery Matrix.
The Mastery Matrix on all podcast platforms that you can find is where you're going to be able to hear me talk more about these things.
Beautiful. That is amazing. And let's just spell your name out loud for anybody writing this down. So
it's Khairy Varre. Khairy Varre on all socials or on my website.
Beautiful. That's great. And we'll drop, of course, the links below this episode as well. But I know sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I'm like, oh, quick, I just want to do it now. I want to do it now and go and find you. So beautiful. And then finally, although, like I said earlier, I could ask you so many.
There's no finally with us.
There is. And so many. Yeah, absolutely. To be continued. But this question I'm about to ask you now is a question that I ask every single guest who comes on this podcast, on this show. And it's a question, sometimes people like to close their eyes when I ask it. You don't have to, obviously. Sometimes people ask me to repeat it or ask it, so feel free to do that as well.
Okay.
But Khairy, when everything else falls away, expectations, fear, resistance, what does your soul whisper is next?
When everything else falls
away. Yeah. Expectations, fear, resistance.
Yes. What does
your soul whisper is next?
It's so funny. It brings it back. Maybe that's why I kept talking about that. Just focus on that next thing. This is something that's been coming up a lot, even in my meditations, as I keep hearing, is just take the next step, especially in the world right now that's moving so fast that it's hard to predict what 3 months from now is going to look like. It's hard to predict what anything will look like. And even without that, we don't even know how long we're here, right? It's just stay attached to that vision. And when opportunities show up, just do your best with them. Even if they don't look like they're 100% tight, or they don't look like what you were expecting or how you were expecting to get to the goal, do your best with them as if it is an honor for you to be serving the universe that way. That's what's been coming through. And every time I dabbled, there was a period in the time when I was sick where I knew there would be a way to heal, but I had no idea, and I was starting to be desperate. And I kept going back to moments in my life where I had miracles happen. And I kept asking myself, like, all the time, why did it happen like a miracle back then? And now I can't get out of this. What did I do back then? What was different back then that made it a miracle? And where everything resolved itself almost in a blink of an eye. And I realized that it was the times where I completely surrendered the thing.
Wow.
Where I completely let go of my attachment to making it happen this specific way. And every time those things got resolved, but by a completely different intervention.
Wow.
It was not me, but God, the universe, had already things in play, but I was blocking them, right?
By the way you were attached to the outcome of how they needed or what you thought they should show up.
Exactly. Right. So I wouldn't even look at all of those signs that were like,
oh my God,
here, you know?
Yeah.
And I would just focus on me trying to make the thing happen, right? And so once I realized that, oh my God, so for a lot of these things that I'm working on, I now understand what people say by hold on to the vision, but let go and surrender the process.
Okay.
Right? Like that's when it finally clicked.
Yes.
Again, why do we finally
we hear these things? It's so true.
So that is what's so clear to me now. And for the past several years, and even now as I'm going into this new adventure with AI, it actually feels exciting and easy because I know that I can't control any of it.
Oh my gosh.
I can just hold on to the vision and the feeling of purpose. When I was sick, I kept asking God, I was like, on the days that I wasn't mad at him, and, you know, and saying not nice things.
Sure.
On the other days, I would be like, just help me heal so I can be of service. But it's funny, the past several years, I was looking at what is that service? So I started pouring into my clients, which was great. But now this feels like the next level service for me.
Wow.
This feels like the thing that I'll be doing for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels so true and crowned and planted, right? And because I have no idea where this is taking us, it's actually easier to surrender. It's actually easier to not be attached to one way of it happening,
Oh my
right?
gosh, that's so amazing.
Which allows me to just show up and do what I know to do best, which is learning, condensing, and giving it to people in the pieces that they need individually to get to their next level. That's what I know to do.
Yeah.
I can't attach to anything else.
And I'm hearing enjoyment.
Oh my God. Yes.
I feel that
light.
Enjoyment. Yes.
Not knowing feels so light in this situation.
It's so incredible. And there is so much unknown. And though there's really, I love how you said that.
Yeah.
You can't control it.
Exactly. And potential lives in the unknown. Potential lives in the unknown. So I actually think that this is the best time that we've ever lived in, because we don't know. And when we don't know, if we allow ourselves to let go of the past stories and we anchor ourselves in principles and values, we will be totally fine and we can do really great things.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Khairy.
That was a long answer.
That was the best answer. It was amazing. It was totally incredible. I never ever know. How could I know? I can't control it. And so I enjoy it.
Exactly.
What will come out at the end of that question? But it felt like the question to ask when I was feeling into what is, a ritual question, if you like, for the show. And beautiful answer. Really, really beautiful. Thank you so much for being here. I do have a feeling we are going to be back.
Oh, yes.
Anytime.
I'll fly to Hawaii. You come to Portugal and we'll do the thing.
Okay. You are so welcome anytime. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for that wisdom. Thanks for tuning in. I am so grateful we got to spend this time together. To instantly know about new episodes dropping, be sure to subscribe to The Kate Kenney Show, #Unfiltered, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you enjoyed this episode, do please leave a review, especially if you listen on Apple Podcasts. This will help more people access what's shared here. If you really loved this episode, take a screenshot on your phone and share it on social media. Tag me at The Kate Kenney and I'll be sure to reshare your post. Remember, when you dare to go unfiltered, everything changes. Thanks again for listening. Keep shining that bright light of yours into the world, and I'll see you next time.